Please join me in welcoming to the stage the 2011 Kansas Teacher of the Year, Curtis Chandler.
Well, good evening, everyone. I already saw who was teachers. I wanted to thank New Dawn one more time. I don't think, and it's my humble opinion, that there are few things we can do in life that are more important than providing the world with good music. I know this because as a child I thought I was going to be a famous singer. I followed a few of my favorite bands, and I grew up until it took a grown-up who loved me very much to tell me, you can't sing. And, I'm grateful for the hard work that they put into that. To tell you the truth, I was really excited to come here tonight because it's Salina. You have to understand, my wife went to school here. Very talented, beautiful young woman. Why don't you wave real quick? That's Valerie. She was the homecoming queen here. So you have to understand that every time we come back to her hometown, it's always, oh, Valerie, yay, yay. Oh, you must be Valerie's husband. And so tonight I thought for certain, since my name's on the program, at least they'd be like, oh, you're Curtis's wife. And guess how it happened? We come right through the door. Two people run up, Valerie, 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 Valerie. Oh, you must be Valerie's husband. That's right. Okay. Never get away from that. That's okay. She earned it. Folks, real quick, when it's all said and done, there'll be a little quiz, because that's the only way we can keep you from falling asleep after good Italian food. You have to remember three things: lessons from the lawn, lessons from the plane, and lessons from the cruise ship. What are they? Go. Lessons from the lawn, lessons from the plane, lessons from the cruise ship. You can't tell my father was a chaplain in the military. There's a lot of call and response stuff, so probably won't be your typical speech. Here's the lawn. About 7th grade, my dad was going to get deployed to Korea for about a year, and I was kind of excited. Not because he was going to leave, but because he came to me just beforehand. And this is how he made it easier. He said, I'm going to put you in charge of the lawn for a year. And I was very excited because the fertilizing, the mowing, the edging, the weeding, these were all things that I'd done, but I'd never been allowed to be in charge of myself. And he told me what an important job this was. And over that year, I learned something about accountability and stewardship. And when he came back, I was really excited. I wanted to show him everything that I'd done, how pretty much nothing had died. And I also wanted to point these things out. I remember his face when I said, all right, Dad, now the next step is this. And I showed him the spots that I had discovered that weren't good growing spots. Because it was in Texas, the soil was sandy in a lot of places. We had fire ant problems. And I said, Dad, this is going to be our plan. We're going to buy some new equipment. We're going to make sure that we redo and re-landscape these spots. And you think he'd be very excited to hear this from his son. And he looked at me like, a little too big for your britches, aren't you? The good news is he had some suggestions of his own. We put our heads together, and we had a good-looking lawn before that, and then we had a really beautiful lawn after that. And to tell you the truth, that's what this year has been like. Kansas is a beautiful state, and we have wonderful things going on in education. But like any place, there's still much work to be done. And a lot of my speeches I've been invited to is come talk about and celebrate the profession and so on and so forth. Now, this doesn't go well. This is not my fault. There he is. He said, why don't you talk about current education issues, but don't take too long. So we'll do both of those real quick. If we're going to talk about work that still needs to be done, it's my humble opinion that here we go. If you walk into a classroom right now, it probably looks exactly like the same classroom that I had when I was a child. Which means education itself in many classes hasn't changed. And all we can talk about at this part is 21st century learning. Nobody can deny the fact that students are much, much different. Much, much different. Second thing, professional growth opportunities and support. You realize that the moment that we stop growing, we start to atrophy. And so when teachers aren't provided opportunities to continually sharpen their skills, guess what happens? I remember through high school, I worked like crazy. I worked like crazy to lift weights because my dad, he's a beast. He really is. He's shorter than I am, and he's just wide and he's strong. And I always wanted to be just like that, so I lifted weights like crazy. I took 2 years off. Guess how that happened, folks? What happened after 2 years? When you don't start growing, what happens? You go back into atrophy. And that's what I worry about, because one of the first things that gets cut when budgets get tight is professional development. So how do you keep teachers growing? Last one is teacher preparation. And if I could harp on anything or really speak to, this is the one that really has me scared. Because the best part of this has been to work with young kids who are getting ready to go into student teaching. They're so excited to get out there. And so when I have a chance to talk to them, I sit down with them and I say, tell me, what was it like to be a teacher? Is there anybody who's just gotten to the profession in the past 3 years? Anybody here? Anybody that new? Okay, this will be fine. What we usually do is we find 1 or 2 student teachers when we go to a school district, and we say, how long have you been in? You are a student teacher. That'll work. Okay, so humor me. What we do is we've asked them, so how are they going to pick your student teacher? How did they pick your student teacher? Who gets to student teach? And what happens is, and this is kind of and I'm oversimplifying kind of a complex thing here, is the way that you get a new person who wants to go into teaching is you're close enough to a university and you're good enough that somebody says, yeah, they can't do that much damage. In other words, some of our best teachers are our busiest, and a lot of times they don't have time for student teachers. And I had a pretty good I had a pretty good supervising teacher. And I was very grateful for that. And I asked, how did you get me? And it came out just like that. And she looked at me like, you get a little too big for your britches. I said, well, how did this happen? She goes, well, somebody called me and said that they drew a line and this was about as far as they could go and they filled all the people in Manhattan, so you came out here. And as I've talked to young people, we do have very good supervising teachers, but we really need to think through who gets to student teach, okay? And what that experience is designed to look like. I had a fantastic student teacher. We had so much fun, and I say fantastic, but because she came in and I was expected to say, this is what we're going to do. And she said, I've got some really good ideas, and this is what I want to do. She took off from there. She had a lot of fun. She's had no problem getting a job. She's being celebrated in her teaching job at this point because of what she does. She said she had a pretty good student teaching experience. Her husband just got into the profession recently, and we went and did a workshop at their school district. And he came up to us afterwards and said, you guys are crazy. We said, what do you mean? He said, you guys are having so much fun with your students. This is just crazy. This isn't what my class is like. And his wife turned to him first like, don't embarrass me in front of my friends. And then she said, well, why not? And he said, well, to tell you the truth, I just did what my student teacher did, which is kind of hit and miss. And I bring that up because there are young people who are going into the profession, and there's really not much rhyme or reason to who gets chosen and how that is. So if there's anything we can do to put them with our very, very best teachers, even though they're our busiest, I think that might have a tremendous impact on the first couple of years of teaching. This is the other one that's got me thinking, and it's still my humble opinion. When I visit university programs, who are the experts in teacher education colleges? Oftentimes, they're university professors who have PhDs, and that is to be celebrated. Oftentimes, they haven't been in a public school classroom for many years, sometimes decades. And so they are experts in the profession, but they're trying to prepare young people for a classroom they haven't been to in a long, long time. So it starts to make me ask this question, who is really the expert in the classroom? And I know there's a place for academia, but I also think through things like this. We had our student teacher. Can you stand up, please? What's your name? I'm sorry.
My name is Betsy Sanders.
Ms. Sanders. Okay, this is what I'd like you to do. You're not going to hurt anybody's feelings, okay?
Sure.
This is what we call the power in the presentation. About a year or 2 years ago, they said, this is what's going to change education. If you look at the top, when we lecture kids, they're likely to retain what percent? Folks, show me with the right hand at what percent at the top? 5%, okay? So the more active it becomes, audio visual, the kids get to discuss, practice by doing, they get to teach others, they end up retaining 90%. Now you're coming out of a college education program where you've been taught and trained how to be the best teacher. Would you mind just pointing to what most of your classroom experience was like?
Lecture.
Interesting. Now, we've done this all over. Does anybody want to nod if that sounds like it's probably true? Now, you can kind of see the paradox. Thank you very much. And so what we talk about with young people is this. They say, what if we just turn that upside down completely? What if we said, instead, look at the numbers on the left. What if 90% of our time wasn't spent with lecture? What if 75% of our time wasn't with reading? We just turn those numbers completely upside down. If we cut off the top two, made lecture and reading illegal for one day, what would teachers be forced to do? And when you bring that up, people look at you like you're crazy, because what did we go through? Do you remember your classroom experience? How many people spoke in your class? It's usually one person. And when you had a chance to, you would participate. And that's kind of creeping me out. Is when you talk to young people, this is what their experience is like. I think there might be a place to do something like this. Educators in residence. In other words, we spend all this time in Kansas acknowledging the great teachers and figuring out who they are, and then we take them to dinner and we celebrate them, and we don't do much else with them. There's got to be a way to pair them up with the university so the professors and the best teachers in the state can actually come together and work with those teachers. And that would be something really, really neat. Kind of turn the world upside down. So we talk about these things. I hope you're not getting the wrong impression that this is what's wrong with Kansas. There are very many lovely spots, but he said to be short, so I wanted to start instead and just talk about the dry spots. Lessons from the lawn or what? There is still much work to be done. That's the lesson from the lawn. Okay. Lessons from the plane. Does anybody know what airport that is? Anybody flown out of Manhattan, Kansas? Wow. Folks, I have to tell you, I'm terrified of flying. I'll be honest, I don't think I'm afraid of flying. I'm afraid of dying in a plane, which is a little bit different than that. But you get on one of these planes, you can feel everything. And so I remember sitting in this chair and just shaking. And the guy next to me turns to me and goes, "It's going to be okay." What are you talking about? He goes, "You're shaking like a leaf." I said, how do you know this is going to be okay? He goes, well, what I do for a living is I used to design planes, and now it's my job to inspect them and make sure that they're sound. I'm an inspector. He goes, this is a good plane. I said, oh, okay. And then after a while, he keeps talking to me, and in an effort to calm me down, he turns to me and he says, so what do you do for a living? I said, well, I'm a teacher. Folks, you should have seen his face. He looked at me like, oh, does it hurt? You know, like, is anybody here a vegetarian? Anybody a vegetarian? Where you tell your friends that, and they look just like, oh, is it? So, I'm sorry. Like, they feel bad for you because they think you're missing out on something. And I remember, no, I'm a teacher. I tried to tell him this. And we talked about some other stuff, but I'll be honest, I can't remember anything past that. Because all I could think in my head is once he heard I was a teacher, he looked at me like there was something wrong with me.